My name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace. I want to welcome our guests. As many of you all know, we're going to be talking about Jerusalem today. And I'm so pleased to tell you we have here in the studio, we have Fahed and Father George, and I'm going to ask them to pronounce their last names. I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up.
Fahed Abuakel.
Oh, thank you.
How do you spell it? Makhlouf, Makhluf.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Makhlouf.
So what we want to talk about this evening is the Trump decision on declaring that Jerusalem is the capital city of Israel and the consequences. I know that many of you all who have been watching the news on this have found there's just a huge response to this all over the world and people concerned about this. And so we're going to delve into a lot of these issues. But first of all, and I want to mention also we have Ernest Dunkley here, WRFG's Ernest Dunkley. Welcome, Ernest.
Thank you, Heather.
Good. So, Fahed, I'm going to ask you first. Please tell us about yourself, your background, and so forth. And
I grew up about 15 miles northwest of Nazareth in the Galilee area in a small village called Kufr Yassif. And my parents are Palestinian, Arab, Christians, and the church that we went to worship in is an Orthodox church, and the building is about 800 years old. So, and it's like the third, fourth building. That means the first building was like in the 6th, 7th century. So when I became an American citizen, I always said the church that my mother took me to worship in is 4 times the age of the American Constitution, number one. Number two, as I think about the Nakba, what the Palestinian call what happened to us in 1948, the only thing I remember, Heather, about it is my dad taking my 5 sisters, 2 brothers and I, leaving our home. And as a 4-year-old kid, the first one you look for will be your mother. So the only thing I remember running around Dad, 5 sisters and 2 brothers, looking for my mother. She was not there. And suddenly I looked, and she was on the top of the roof. You remember, in the Middle East, the roof is flat. So waving her hand. So I can see her like on a television screen. My dad took us to the east, to a village called Yirka. And we were put in a makeshift Palestinian, like in a scout tents, in a refugee setting. We were there several months, and when we came back, 5 Palestinian villages were destroyed to the ground. So when Israel became a state, everybody that is listening to us today need to remember they destroyed 530 villages and towns all over Palestine, and more than 750,000 Palestinians became refugees. So when I grew up, I said to my mother, why you did not go with us? And I discovered, she said to Dad, you can protect them. This is our home, our land, our church. If they need to kill me, they need to kill me in my home. So I think people need to understand that unless we reconcile Israeli Jews and a Palestinian Arab, the deal in the Middle East is not going to work.
yes, well, thank you so much for that. Father George,
Yes.
your background.
I was born in West Jerusalem. My parents were living in West Jerusalem, and we are 8 kids. I'm number 7 in the family. Yeah, and at that time, I 5 years old, can't remember everything, but what happened is that the Haganah terrorist organization she had a radio station, and from the loudspeaker on top of vehicles, they announced that you have to leave, otherwise, if you don't, your fate will be the fate of the people of Deir Yassin. And we know that Deir Yassin is a village in west from Jerusalem, and there was a massacre by the Irgun under the leadership of Menachem Begin. who became prime minister after that, and he was wanted by the British government, by the British mandate. And if you don't leave, it will be like the people of Deir Yassin that were a massacre. 250 people were killed. Most of them were children and women. So my mother was really scared, and she collected the jewelry, she collected the money, put them in a tin box, sealed it, and buried it under a tile. And we left for a village, but we came back to East Jerusalem. We were under Jordan regime. And I went to school and was about 7 years when we came back to East Jerusalem. The thing is that our house where I was born is not far from East Jerusalem. So I could see the house and see other kids playing in the house. And I remember my Christmas tree, my toys, everything that we left. It was a big apartment. When we left, we lived the 10, my parents and the 8 children, we live in one room. Our one room was our house. So until we came back to East Jerusalem and started school and normal life after that. That's what I remember. I mean, I've been told mostly of my the elder brothers and my parents what happened. We every year on Christmas we used to receive people from Jerusalem, the western part, who used to cross the Mandelbaum, the borders between Jordan and the state of Israel. They used to walk because it's one city and it's not that far. And they told us that our house, which is the inner house, the door, the entrance to the other side, and the back. So our house was no man's land, and the upper, which the entrance was from the back, was inhabited by Israelis who came from Morocco, Iraq, I don't know.
So what years are we talking about?
1948.
And this is in 1948.
Yeah. We
That's
call
what
it
After the war.
That's what the Palestinian, in a way, the two narrative. Israel will say this is Independence Day celebration. To the Palestinian, it's called Nakba.
Yeah.
And the word Nakba means catastrophe. You lost a home, you lost a land, a business, a church, a mosque. It's complete catastrophe.
It is the exodus of Palestinians and the dispossession.
I'd like to just go back to some basics, if you all don't mind. One of the things that's come out, of course, which always seems to come out in times of crisis in Israel and Palestine and so forth, is the Balfour Declaration. Would either one of you just explain that, just to give some kind of background?
Really, the Balfour Declaration is a letter from the Secretary of State of it's called the Foreign Officer, or the Secretary of State in our terminology, of basically of Britain, to the family called Rothschild and the Zionist organization, saying, I promise you Palestine, but when you go there, don't harm the local citizen. The issue is that letter was issued 1917. Britain have jurisdiction over Palestine 1922. So Heather, you and I can promise Brazil, we can promise Mexico to Brazil when we don't have jurisdiction over it. You're talking about power. Britain promised Palestine to the Zion Congress when they have no jurisdiction over it yet. They had legal jurisdiction 1922. So basically, that's 100 years of Balfour Declaration.
Yeah.
And this year we call it basically 69 years since the Nakba, and really 50 years since the Six-Day War, when Israel captured East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza, and the Golan height. That means, Heather, if you and I in 1967 were born, that means you and I today are 50-year-old, know nothing but Israeli
it's true.
military
Right.
occupation.
Right.
And our American context don't know anything about occupation. That means if you are Marietta, you cannot come to Atlanta without a permit. If you are, I mean, you cannot move to anywhere without a permit as a West Banker. No, we're not talking about going to the state of Israel. We're talking about going from village to village, to a hospital, to a university, to my land. I need a permit for the last 50 years.
To do any of that, yeah.
The thing is that Theodor Herzl, who is the founder of the Zionist movement, he is a Jew, but he did not practice Judaism. He is atheist, and he was thinking about to solve the problem of the Jews. He thought of Argentina or Uganda. Those who told him to go to Palestine were the Christian Zionists. So Zionism is mostly Christian rather than, I mean, fundamentalist, the evangelicals, these people who want to push the hand of God, and they want to control the time of the eschaton. They tell Jesus what time he is supposed to come.
Yeah, so there's just always this question about what is the real intent of Israel. I mean, it seems that they keep taking more and more land away and making so many other restrictions that they want to take all this area. I mean, I'm wondering sometimes how far they want to expand their power.
In 1967, I was in East Jerusalem. I was living
Right.
in East Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So basically, I grew up in the Galilee area from 1948 to 1966 when I came to the United States. Any place a person in any Palestinian village in the Galilee want to go to Haifa or Akko or any other place, I need to go to the Israeli military governor and get a permit to go to work, to visit anywhere. So now I feel a lot with the West Bank Palestinians. From 1948, even though I am a citizen of the State of Israel, I needed to go to the military governor and get a permit.
Well,
So-
well, you could easily be denied as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, if to go to work, to go to visit anywhere, I needed really a permit. Yeah.
Be back in just a moment. Stay tuned. Again, my name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I'm pleased to tell you that I'm here in the studio with Fahed and Father George, and I'm not pronouncing their last names. I'm always afraid I'm going to destroy their last name pronunciation, and also Ernest Dunkley. So there's just so much to talk about, I know, but let's get to Jerusalem. Let's talk about Jerusalem and the importance of Jerusalem to so many different communities and the impact this is having on, or Trump's decision is having throughout the world, actually, but particularly, of course, in Palestine and Israel. So go ahead, Fahed.
I would say first what the president did. It's a sad day for Palestine, a sad day for Israel, and a sad day for the United States. Remember, the United Nations in 1947, they divided Palestine, historic Palestine, to two divisions, one called to be Jewish and one to be Palestinian. And the majority of the population of Palestine was Palestinian. Okay. So the United Nations in 47 divided historic Palestine to two, one to be Jewish and one to be Palestinian. And at the same time, they said Jerusalem is a sacred place. It needs to be like the Vatican. So there is a resolution at the United Nations to create Jerusalem to be a sacred city for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So after that, basically, the new state of Israel took more land than what the United Nations gave them. And right now, we will call those borders the Green Line. So the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip became out of the hand of Israel. So all the way after that, basically, the issue from 1948 all the way to 1967, East Jerusalem and the West Bank was under the jurisdiction of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and Gaza was under the basically Egypt. So during the war in 1967 June, Israel took Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula, took East Jerusalem and the West Bank and took the Golan Heights from Syria. And the United Nations created a second resolution called 242. And 242 says if any peace is going to come, it's going to be exchanged peace for land. So later on, our president from Georgia took that seriously, and he said to Egypt, you recognize Israel. Israel, you returned the Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt. And that worked. And later on, a little bit with Jordan. But the issue of Palestine still was dormant. The whole idea of Palestinian to become a state of their own, Israel did not want, and they did not act on it. So the resolution on the issue of Jerusalem is very crucial. I need to ask the President of the United States, our President, which Jerusalem you're talking about? Is he talking about the one that we see on television with the Dome of the Rock called the Old City of Jerusalem, which is only basically a 1 square mile? Mr. President, are you talking about West Jerusalem? Mr. President, are you talking about Greater Jerusalem? Now, Greater Jerusalem was passed by the city of Jerusalem and also by the Knesset, the border of the city, Greater Jerusalem, from the north all the way to Ramallah, from the south all the way to Bethlehem, from the east all the way to the mountains over Jericho, and the west, I don't know how far. So it's just like Atlanta. I am the mayor of Atlanta, and I will say, hey, Smyrna, Marietta, Kennesaw, all the way to Gainesville, all the way to Athens, all the way to Macon, baby, you are mine. So I don't think our American people will know or ever heard or ever saw the map of Greater Jerusalem. So I needed to the president to tell him, before you say Jerusalem is the capital of the state of Israel, please, will you tell me which Jerusalem you're talking about? The old, the new, or Greater Jerusalem?
All right, so
Yes,
that's complex.
Yes, Fahed mentioned the partition plan of 1947 resolution, UN Resolution 181, and at that time when they wanted to divide Palestine between Palestinians and Israelis, they wanted Jerusalem to have a special status, and there is a status.
Wait, who wanted the special status
United
for
Nations.
Jerusalem? The United Nations.
The
did,
United
yeah.
Nations
Okay.
who voted for the partition.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And they said Jerusalem should be not under anybody. Nobody should control, because it belongs to three faiths. It's for the Jews, for the Christians, and for the Muslims. Has the right to exclusively control the city, while there are the right to respect the rights of the other. That's why Jerusalem has a special status since the 1947, since the partition plan of the United Nations. I give you the example of my life. They want land empty. They don't want people. So what happened in 1967? I was a young person in my 20s, and we were under curfew all the day long. And they used to give us 1 or 2 hours just to go buy from the market what you need for the house to eat and so forth. So I have a friend who lives about a few miles north of Jerusalem called Beit Hanina, and I went to visit with them. Then, the curfew, I had to stay with them and sleep over there. And a consensus, people, gentlemen and ladies, came over. So they wanted to register people, and they took the name of the members of the family I was visiting, and asked me to give the information about myself. I said where I live in East Jerusalem, where I was born in West Jerusalem, what school I go to, all the information about myself, and my last name is not the same last name. I told them I am a guest here. I don't belong to this house. They were writing down and it was in Hebrew, and I don't know the language. So after that, I went to, because the seminary has to close down, and I was a student, theology student.
So where was the seminary?
It's called St. Anne Seminary.
And where was that?
It was near Herod's Gate where the pool
In the old city?
In the old city,
That's
where's the pool of Bethsaida.
So why? So what do you mean it had to be closed down? Is that
Because all the students came from the different cities of the Middle East, from Aleppo, from Damascus, from Beirut, from Cairo. So after East Jerusalem was taken by the Israelis, the Red Cross took them each to his
Country.
to his town, to his city. So I am from Jerusalem. I stayed in the city, so the bishop sent me to France to follow up my studies, theological studies.
So you were sent to France?
Yes, I went, yeah, in 1967, about the month of October. But when I turned back, I had to have what they call the laissez-passer, let pass, or a travel document issued by the Ministry of Interior. But I renewed it once in Paris, in the Israeli consulate in Paris once, then it expired, anyways, my father passed away. And my brother...
And where was your father at the time?
Living in Jerusalem.
I see. Okay.
So he passed away, and my brother sent me a permit to visit my town where I was born.
You needed a permit to get in.
I needed a permit to come from Transjordan, because after France I went to Transjordan, Amman. So they sent me a permit to cross the bridge and go to Jerusalem.
Father George, I just need to take a quick break here. I want our listeners to know that you are listening to WRFG Atlanta 89.3 FM. My name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I'm here with WRFG's Ernest Dunkley, and we're talking with Fahed and Father George tonight about Jerusalem and the Trump decision. So there's just so much complexity here. Well, first of all, I want to mention before I forget this, actually, in the program tonight, I appreciated your saying that Jerusalem has been thought of or should be thought of like the Vatican. I was thinking if there's any place that should be like that, it would be Jerusalem. But so that's an interesting concept. I think I'd really like to share with our listeners and me as well just about the importance, the relevance of Jerusalem for all these faiths. I mean,
and we're talking about 16 million Jews worldwide. We're talking about more than 2 billion Christians from around the world. And we're talking about 1,500,000,000 Muslims of the world. And that's where I feel, for the president to say, all of the past president did not act on it, and I'm going to be the cowboy to do it. It just, there are three things in life you don't touch: money, sex, and religion. And all of the negotiation, they were saying, hey, let's negotiate basically the Palestinian, about the Palestinian state. Let's negotiate about the return of Palestinian. Let's negotiate about water. Let's negotiate about this and that. And let's leave Jerusalem to the end. They call the issue of Jerusalem like the atomic bomb. You don't hit the atomic bomb the
but
first
again,
thing.
why is it so important to people?
It's so important because the city of Jerusalem is sacred to the three monotheistic religion. It's sacred to Judaism, to Christianity, and Islam. I mean, let's face it. Right now, we're going toward Christmas, huh? For the first 600 years of Christianity, nobody said hello to the city of Bethlehem. Nobody celebrated the issue of the birth. In early Christianity, the power of Christianity is Jerusalem and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Growing up as a Palestinian Christian, I always looked for Easter. That's when we got the gift. That's when we went to church. That's the big deal, huh? In America, we start celebrating Christmas, September, October, November, December. Easter comes, nobody feels about it. Middle East Christianity and Palestinian Christianity, they look for Easter because early Christianity, that's when you became a member of the church. That's when you took a communion. That's when you were baptized. Jerusalem and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the center of Christianity. And so it's sacred to more than 2 million Christians. It's sacred to Muslim because the first place the prophet followers start to, when they prayed, they would look to Jerusalem. And then later on they changed it toward Mecca. So it's sacred in the psyche of Christianity and Islam, and of course to Judaism. So to me, to say to 2 billion Christians and to 1.5 billion Muslims, you don't count and Jerusalem is not sacred to you, because basically the Prime Minister of Israel always said it is ours and it's exclusive. From a historical point of view, the three religions fought over Jerusalem in the past and in the after Christianity, and in about 1,000 years during the Crusades and so forth. So the smart thing from them will be, in the 21st century, how can we look to that city to reconcile Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs? How can we reconcile the people? Need to be a city of peace, not the city of war. And what he did, he touched the most sensitive psyche of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and say, I'm going to throw the bomb and hell with everybody.
I'd like to know why Trump did this. Why do you think he did it?
Go ahead. How I can read the gesture, what Trump did. To me, Trump is just a puppet. There are three persons who had a major role in what pushed him to make that decision. First of all, Netanyahu. Netanyahu, after Ishaq Rabin signed the Declaration of Principles in 1993, it didn't take long time for him to be assassinated by the right wing, the people of Netanyahu, because they don't want to give the Palestinians any right. Everybody has to leave. They want it to be a Jewish state, 100%. Those who are not Jews, I was telling my story because they didn't want me to register and to belong to Jerusalem anymore. I have American passport. I cannot land on Tel Aviv airport with my American passport. I have to go to Transjordan and cross the bridge. So, and to go to Ramallah or to Nablus, but to go to Jerusalem where I was born and I was raised, I need a permit, and this permit might be issued and or might not be issued. So I am deprived from my own city because they want it for themselves and they don't want anybody else. So Netanyahu doesn't want to end occupation, doesn't want to hear of Palestinian state, doesn't want to Palestinians stay in the Holy Land. Now other than Netanyahu, we have Jared Kushner. And Jared Kushner is the supporter of the illegal settlements, number one. He gives money to the settlements, illegal settlements built in the occupied territories.
And he, of course, is the son-in-law of Trump.
Yeah, he's the son-in-law. Then we have the big devil. Remember when Trump gave his speech, who was behind him? Mike Pence. And this guy is Zionist till like hell. So for him also, the idea as an evangelical, they want to push the hand of God and they want to control God timing. So what they want to accelerate the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ. That's how they
Father George, let me ask you, one of the articles I sent out recently was about one of the huge contributors to Trump's campaign, Shelton Adelson. Do you know about him? He gave him
Yes.
Maybe
millions of
that's not-
dollars,
yeah, more,
apparently.
Yeah.
That he also
yeah.
wanted to see Jerusalem as
Yeah.
the capital, apparently.
And-
Go
and
ahead.
I blame the president little bit. I think we really need to go to the real issue. In 1995, both the House and the Senate passed a resolution that we need to move the consulate, the embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And every Secretary of State since then will say to the president, please, this is a hot issue, don't. So every 6 months, the president since 1995 will sign a paper saying the next 6 months. After 6 months, he will sign again. So basically, our problem is with the House and the Senate. Really, the president implemented what they want. So here the issue, that for me to become a congressman and a senator, our American system is naked. I need a vote and I need $1. Huh? The Palestinians have a 0 vote and a $0.
And they're paying taxes.
Exactly. We are paying taxes. That's true. But I'm talking about the real problem is in the House and the Senate, because every president since then, every 6 months will sign, will postpone it 6 months, postpone it 6 months. So if we want to come to reality, our hearer need to know that I just remember, Congresswoman McKinney, vividly. They really, AIPAC wanted her to sign. Unless you sign on the dot that you accept Jerusalem to be the undivided capital of the State of Israel, we're not going to support you. And in less than 2 years, she was out of office.
Yeah, they went after her, for sure. Go ahead, Father.
What I see that it's not all the stories that the president, he doesn't know exactly what he is doing. He is just implementing what the others 3 I spoke about want him to do. So they want Netanyahu, Jared and Kushner and Mike Pence, they want the United States to withdraw from the peace process. They want to end Oslo.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Dear me.
because I was explaining what Netanyahu wants.
Wow, yeah.
How he thinks, because I told you that
They don't want the peace part. They don't want to have any more
Ishaq
negotiations.
Rabin was
is what you're
killed
saying.
because
I
he
see.
signed the Declaration of Principles.
I see.
And Jared, he is the big number one, and the person you mentioned that who are supporting the illegal settlements.
Yeah.
Because if you want to have a Palestinian state, vital, the settlements filled all the West Bank. You cannot have a two-state solution. It's over now.
So is it completely over now? There's no hope for this? I mean, I'd like to get into this discussion. Like,
I don't think
what can be done about the situation?
I don't think there is any chance to continue to the peace process and to have the two-state solution.
But Father
anymore.
George, look at the critique this has received all over the world. I mean, it's like
They don't allow there's a quartet, which is United Nations, Russia, and United States, and the UN quartet, and the U.S. don't allow any of the others to interfere. They are the only brokers. The quartet is just
so what exactly does this mean then? I mean, so what
exactly
is there anything that can be done?
Is
I mean,
that now, instead of being a broker, instead of being mediator, they became part
of the problem.
They became part. I mean, between Palestinians
the United States became
United
part
States
of the problem.
and Israel. You cannot separate. The two are one, especially for Mike Pence. And so
Go
Ernest
ahead.
wants to say so. Go ahead, Ernest.
Okay, I've been watching this show since I was about 10 years old, which was 1948. I learned about the problems in Palestine with the refugees coming from Europe trying to find a home. a couple of years later, when I was 13, which was in 1953, I was living in a part of New York that was a Jewish neighborhood. And in the neighborhood there, I became aware that the local movie theater, which I was going to quite regularly on Saturdays, was the drop-off point for all the weapons that and whatever else they wanted to send to Israel.
Oh, that's interesting.
So this was in 1953.
Wow.
I remember very clearly trucks being loaded at the back of the movie theater with whatever could be brought to be sent to Israel for the war. America has always been behind. Now, at this time, they were lynching black people in the South. We weren't allowed to carry a BB gun. But in New York, the Jews there were allowed to pick up weapons and everything else and load them into trucks and send them down to the docks in Brooklyn and ship them over to Israel. I remember that clearly. I also remember reading at that time a book by a Jew by the name of Kostler, who spoke about the 13th tribe. He spoke about Europeans that had become converted and were now pushing themselves into the East as Jews. At that time also, I learned about the movement of the black Muslims came in at that time. You may not have realized it, but Elijah Muhammad was on the move since the early 40s. And I saw how this movement was treated. I saw how he spoke about the different tribes that were the original Hebrews that lived in that area and that supported that area. He spoke about the Muslims. I think the gentlemen here have a very clear understanding of what's about to happen in that area. And I think America is not for everyone in that area.
No, right.
Truthfully.
I mean, so there are a couple of things, and our time's just gone so quickly, because we need to have some discussion about if there's anything that can be done or what people should be doing. What are some suggestions? But I also would appreciate one of you giving a definition of what is a Palestinian. Who is a Palestinian?
And also who is a Jew.
And who is a Jew?
Yes.
That's more important.
Okay, who is a
Yes.
Jew? All right. So
To me, the Palestinian, because always they talk about Arabs, and Arabs for us are people from the Gulf, Saudi Arabia. So in the seventh conquest, the Fertile Crescent, Great Syria, was invaded by the Arabs, but that part of the world was inhabited by people over there. The Canaanite, the Syriacs, the Aramite, the Chaldeans, the
huge diversity of
Assyrians.
people, right?
So the Great Syria and Palestine is part of it. When the conquest just changed culture and converted some people to religion, but they didn't change demography. The demography people are the originals, who are the Canaanite before were there before Abraham came from Mesopotamia and before Moses came from Egypt.
Father George, this requires a whole other hour, right?
I'm
Go ahead.
interested for our audience to understand the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is 50-year Israeli military occupation over the Palestinians, 2.7 in the West Bank and about 2 million in the Gaza area. At this point in history, our audience need to realize from the river of Jordan all the way to the Mediterranean, Israel controlled the whole deal. So half of them are Israeli Jews and half of them Palestinian Arabs. That's the population we need to be aware of. So for the President of the United States, like to say to 330,000 Palestinians in East Jerusalem, you are zilch, you don't count. They are 40% of the population.
40%, wow.
40%
Yeah.
of that population. To say you are zero, and I don't recognize your right. To say to 2 billion Christians, you don't have right. To say to 1.5 billion Muslim, you don't have right. To me, we are dealing with the illogical. At this point in history, I like everybody to realize the only thing the Palestinians want is for the United States and Israel to abide by international law.
Okay,
Nothing
so
else.
that
International
should be
law.
the call, right?
That's
International
the call for
law.
international law.
Right. And
And-
so,
and-
but the international law, we're talking about the United Nations resolution?
Correct.
And what else?
Basically, at this point in history, Israel and the United States are saying power and the gun is the solution, and not international law.
Okay.
And that's to me the same.
Right.
I mean, imagine we, the United States, help the creation of the United Nations to have little order, because in the old ways, it is the gun and it is power. I can do anything in the colonial period. I can go to Africa and turn him to pieces. I go to the Middle East. I mean, the whole Middle East right now is a smart aleck British general sat down and says, Jordan, this is your deal. Syria, this. I mean, it's illogical. So if we want to go to the jungle law, God bless. But if we want to be a people of law, and that's what I want to challenge my Jewish brothers and sisters in the United States. I've been here for 50 years. I have been here for 52 years, huh? And American Jews have been in the forefront of civil rights, human rights,
They have
working
been.
for
It's
justice.
true. It's
I
true,
salute
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Will you please have the same value when you go and in the occupation in Palestine?
Father George has been wanting to jump in here. Go ahead.
Ernest mentioned that in 1953 there were piles of weapons to be sent to Palestine, to the Israelis, and they are teaching elementary school kids how to use the arms. They are teaching them.
They're doing that in Israel.
Yes, they are teaching
And they were
them.
sending children from here there.
Yeah.
Wait a moment.
Right,
You're
that's true.
passing that whole. You're missing a whole lot here.
You know,
Who's been supporting Israel all this time? We know who's been supporting Palestine. No one. Who's been supporting Israel?
Yeah, it's
they
true.
send
I beg. Come.
cops, police officers over there to learn how to be brutal.
Oh, and they've been sending American. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So-
the Atlanta Police Department's been going over there
they
too.
teach them how to
No question.
hate Gentiles.
That's right.
Because they are chosen, they are different, distinguished from everybody else.
And many of
Mm.
my Jewish friends have gone to Israel to be in the army.
In the army.
And this was going on since I was 18 years old.
Wow.
I'm 80 years old
Yeah,
now.
right,
This is a
right.
long time.
Yeah.
There are two things I want to mention. One, that President Abbas say, today we do not accept America to be the mediator, because by the action of Trump, they disqualified the United States, number one. Two, I wish you sat for 45 minutes on Friday and saw at the United Nations Security Council, imagine 14 nations blasting the hell out of Trump and the U.S. policy on Jerusalem, and we are the only one defending the deal. I mean, our friend, France, England, everybody blasting us to pieces, that we are really breaking international law. It was a sad day.
Whether Abbas wants to end the role of the United States as a broker or not, whether, Abbas wants the United States to not to be anymore the broker for the peace process or not, they withdrew voluntarily. These three, the unholy trinity, Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump, Netanyahu, Pence, and
Kushner.
they want to finish.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need a program about Christian Zionism in this here.
I would love to do a program about Christian Zionism. And, so one of the things that you're saying people should be pushing for is an adherence to international law as far as
That's the only thing the
the
Palestinian
Palestinian. Yeah, okay, so I like that. But, I want to go back to the concept of Jerusalem being like a Vatican, like how would you call it, like an international holy place. Just think of where the Muslims and the Christians all over the world, as well as the Jewish community. I think that should be pushed for.
And
to be
not
perfectly
only that,
frank.
if there is genuine peace in that place, you have 2 billion Christians want to visit, you have 1.5 billion Muslims want to visit. God Almighty will bless the Israelis and the Palestinians with that gift of tourism more than our exclusive way of the way we are doing it.
Yeah. So, and there's no possibility of So basically you're saying that the two-state solution is gone. I mean, what about one-state solution?
That's exactly, we have to be thankful to Trump, because now the uprising have started again.
Yes.
Yeah,
in the
right.
occupied territories,
Right.
and I don't think they will stop until we have a democratic, secular state where Jews, Christians, and Muslims have the same right. One nation under God, indivisible,
All right.
with liberty and justice for all.
So
Thank you, Father George.
In the Old Testament, there is saying, you meant it for evil, but God turned it around. With the problems with Libya, Syria, Yemen, and all over the place, people forgot about Palestine, and Trump resurrected the dead. Right now, Palestine is boiling, the Middle East is boiling, and I hope we will have a solution for justice.
Fahed, do you want to give some ideas of where people could go to get information? Can you make some suggestions? I know you've sent me a lot of articles as well, but any place in particular you would recommend?
At this point, you want basically www.pcrf and Palestinian Medical Relief Society, PCR, Palestinian Medical Relief Society.
Okay, thank you for that.
And then they can call you, and I will basically let them go to this www.pmrs.ps or www.jhgp.org or Kairos Palestine.
Kairos, Palestine, okay.
.ps
Right.
or kairosusa.org or the ipmn.org.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Fahed to send that list to me, and if those of you who are on my email list, I'm going to send that out. And if you would like to be on that email list, please email me at heather@wrfg.org. So I'm wanting to thank Fahed and Father George and Ernest so much for this evening. It was just very instructive.
I really want to thank you because our media and print have zilch on that issue. To you.
Well,
And I
thank
want
you.
to encourage every listener to send their money to support this station.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you for that, too.